think right now people are feeling like there's something really to be
Yeah.
feared.
And that's when you get into the mechanics of the mind. And that's one of the benefits people, I have because I've had panic attacks. And so you can experience for yourself exactly the flaws and the tricks of the mind. Because
Mhm.
what the mind will do is will say, look, you know, particularly if you're having a panic attack, you have all these irrational thoughts. Oh, this is going to happen. I'm going to die any second. And then there's another part of you that recognizes, well, I'm not sure I necessarily believe that. But then the mind is very tricky. It says, well, remember, there's this one time and I was right back in the past.
Yes, exactly. People will say that all the time, right?
And,
No, I
and
know.
it's
Yeah, it's
and
happening.
it's exactly what's happening right now. So we're catastrophizing, but at the same time, the mind is tricking all of us into believing, like, look, I was right this one time in the past. I told you everything was going to be horrible, and guess what? It was. Maybe it was one time out of 100, but the mind grabs a hold of that one time it was right, and it uses that to convince you that it's right now. And so it's very convincing. This is why, of course, a person who has a panic attack, it's almost like they have this like consciousness splits where there's a part that knows this is all mind's trickery, but the mind somehow is so convincing because it tells us, hey, I was right about this in the past, and it forgets all the times it was wrong.
Right.
And so suddenly you start thinking, well, maybe it's true this time. That's the fear that we're experiencing right now. Maybe the mind is right. Maybe I'm not catastrophizing. How do you know
Well,
I'm not
maybe,
catastrophizing?
and everybody else is saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So, so then there's that, right? Like I'm not, if I'm wrong, then all these people are wrong. And clearly that can't be the case.
And when again, I mentioned that we mind wander about half of the day, but mind wandering, I'm going to do a video on this pretty soon, but mind wandering got this super upgrade. So we have phones
Yes.
and they look kind of harmless. These things are more dangerous to our happiness than seems to be on the surface. Because first thing, the paper I was describing, again, it's one of the best papers out there, definitely worth your time. It's called A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind. You can get it for free online. Take a few minutes, go through it, because what they do is they show that when the mind wanders, that makes us unhappy. That actually, they were able to show causally that mind wandering makes us unhappy and anxious. Now, that's a really important insight because people are spending 4 hours a day on their phone. Well, what are they doing? They're doing an advanced form of mind wandering. And so look at just write down a few things during, like, what were you doing when you're on your phone? It's catering to your ego. It's showing how your side is going to win. It's showing you stuff you'd like to buy. It's doing everything it can do to enhance the ego. And of course, that's what algorithms do. Because if you spend a little more time on something that your ego is really enjoying, then it sends you more of that. If you spend less time because your ego didn't like that, then it doesn't show it up. It doesn't show up again. And so these are advanced forms of mind wandering. And what they do is they get us deeper and deeper into our side of the argument because that's all we hear. And so it becomes more and more impossible for us to consider that we're wrong. Because so I study cognitive science. And when you look at the mind from the cognitive science viewpoint, so you can look at the mind in two ways. You can look at the mind from a spirituality viewpoint, like Nisargadatta, Eckhart Tolle. And the mind that they're talking about actually is the exact same mind that cognitive science is talking about. So that's kind of cool. When I made that insight, I'm like, wow, it's the same mind. And there's over 300 documented errors of the mind.
Hmm.
You can't even list them. I mean, I used to have this on the door of my office because it was too much to memorize. And so, what we've learned through cognitive science is that this mind that convinces us that it's right all the time actually has a terrible record of inaccuracies, over 300 errors. And you can just show for yourself that it's a poor GPS to reality. Just go through the day and, oh, here's a catastrophe. Does it turn out to be true? And when you take a little time to invest in this, you'll see and that's one of the ways I got out of my mess, is this mind was telling me that this horrible thing is going to happen, and I learned to distrust it. And many spiritual teachers will talk about the process of enlightenment as a deconstruction. And it's a deconstruction of the mind itself, of trusting it. And of course, we've talked about people like Byron Katie and her method of just taking your basic assumptions and showing you do not know these for absolute certain. And so all the catastrophizing your mind might have right now, you could write it all out, and you could write your confidence, like, is this gonna, and follow it. And odds are the mind, uh it's going to be off track. It's going to be off the reality track like it usually is. We could get by without mind at all.